All right. This is so exciting. Welcome, 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 everybody. Welcome to the Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. I am your host, Mike DeLuca, and I am extremely grateful that you're joining us tonight. We have more and more folks coming in as we speak, and everyone is welcome. If you're joining us live tonight, you're welcome. If you're joining us on Facebook and then eventually YouTube, you are most welcome as well. We are so grateful that you're here. We're so grateful that you're bringing your own consciousness, your love, your energy to this discussion tonight. Um, this is Integrative Wellness and Development Podcast. We are not affiliated with any other group. I don't represent any other organization. It's just little old me and my podcast. And we are dedicated to bringing you information, inspiration, perspiration, all kinds of ations in the hopes that we find additional ways to awaken and to grow individually, personally, spiritually. It comes out of my insatiable desire to learn more about life, about health, about our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual self. And we're going to be talking about all of those things tonight. I'm incredibly honored to have our guest here with us tonight. She is someone who has been inspiring people for many years. She certainly, over the last few weeks, has inspired the living daylights out of me, literally. Um, I'm very blessed that she was willing to come on our little show. And so, with that, I want to introduce you to Reverend Dr. Norma Edwards. Norma, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being part of tonight's show. Thank you for everything you do and everything you are. So if you will unmute, you're going to be able to speak to our folks. So down on the bottom of
Okay,
Zoom,
I've got it.
there you are. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. I'm
Oh,
excited
goodness.
tonight to share this experience with Michael DeLuca. I think it's the very first time that I'm being interviewed by someone who has had the near-death experience. And so this is very exciting for me. We've both been the same place, have many of the same experiences, and this is exciting.
Well,
Thank
we
Thank you all
we
for being here.
we are very grateful you're here and everyone else is here. I'm gonna share my PowerPoint, and there it is. There you can see a beautiful photo of Norma, and this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Norma's book, which I just finished and was incredibly inspired by, is called Awakening. And this is what we're going to be talking about tonight is our individual and collective process that we all go through in awakening to our true nature as a spiritual being having an experience in the physical body. And for some of us, that experience of awakening can be an incredibly shocking and disorienting experience. And for some of folks, it comes through a near-death experience. And Norma will speak a little bit about that. Mine came with a near-life experience, the memory of prior to entering into this physical body, and we'll talk about that. Others have it through contemplation, meditation, dreams. But however you have the experience of awakening, there is a process to it, and there are guidance available and individuals to help through that process. And we're going to be talking about that. So tell you a little bit about Norma. The Reverend Dr. Norma Edwards is a truly amazing and inspiring soul, and I will attest to that. She was born in Guyana, South America, and has survived not one, not two, three near-death experiences. Upon every return, she brought a distinct message for humanity. Life is eternal, love is divine, God is love, and love turns into divine light. And we are going to be talking about all of that tonight. Norma studied diligently under the tutelage of 8 spiritual masters spanning 7 countries, many decades, who generously she generously shares the gifts she received from their tutelage. Norma is a change agent. I can attest to that. A wisdom keeper on the planet. I can attest to that. A spiritual therapist and certified NLP life coach. She is the founder and CEO of Reprogram Your Life, LLC, the author of 2 books, Awakening, which we're going to be speaking about tonight, and Touchstones to Remembering Your Spirit. Norma is also the creator and presenter of a Rites of Passage process for young female students at James Madison University. Her program, Spirituality 101, was broadcast on Voice America. It opened the doorway to spiritual growth and development. She received the prestigious Linowes Leadership Award from the Community Foundation in Washington, D.C., for her work in prison reentry and community development. Norma also will be a featured keynote speaker at the upcoming Spiritual Awakenings International Conference on June 6th to 7th online, and you can find out more about that and register at spiritualconference.org. So, with that introduction, welcome, Norma. And again, we are so grateful that you're here with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So go ahead.
And to share. So
Well,
feel free to ask questions, and if I have answers, I will give you the answers.
Okay, Norm, let's talk about how your near-death experience played an important role in your spiritual awakening in this lifetime and lit the light to guide you in the direction that you are now traveling.
Something should have told me you have deep, deep questions.
And you have deep, deep answers, so it's going to be a piece of cake.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But I was born in Guyana, South America. A little bit about my background.
Please.
My father was an educator. And I say that because he wasn't just a teacher. He was determined that young people, despite where their level in life was, even if they were growing up in poverty, should be educated. My mother, they met. They met in a church where they sang. Music has been the key to who I am. They sang in the church. And somehow, don't ask me how, at 16, my mother got pregnant. And my grandfather was the pastor in the church. And in those days, when that happened, they read you out of church. So they read them both out of church. And my aunt took my mother in. And because at that time, my father was married. And growing up, I was taken. My father's wife at the time was she was handicapped from the waist down, and so I guess this baby coming into our life, she kind of like ignored the consequences of how I got there, but she was very excited, and I spent a lot of time, at least twice a month, in my father and my stepmother, I should say, home as I grew up. And she she always reminded me that education was important. Education is the key that opens the door to prosperity. And so I grew up between these two families. My mother was not allowed to communicate with my father, but I was allowed. My aunt took me there and so on. Twice a month I would go and I would spend the weekend. So I grew up with this father with this statement he repeated over and over again. Education is the key that unlocks the door of poverty. I heard that so often that I would put my hands to my ears and says, oh, there he goes again, as though I haven't heard it 1,000 times. When I was 12, my father's wife died. And he took a year to mourn, etc., etc. And up until then, he was not allowed to visit our home. I mean, my mother and I lived with my aunt and her husband. They had no children. And I remember one day, after a year, he mourned for a year. And after a year, one day, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door. My father was standing there. And I didn't know what to do. I was totally confused. And he says, no, don't be so confused. You can close the door and go let your aunt know that there's a visitor at the door. So I did. And it was the weirdest thing. I had never seen my father at my home, my aunt's home, etc. And he took his hat off and he came in and he said, well, his wife had died and he'd mourned for 12 months. And now he wanted to make things right. And that was really, really very strange for me. But of course, I had grown up with my father pushing education, etc., etc., etc. And then my parents came together. Once my parents came together, now I'm living a totally different life. But my father belonged to the Masonic temple. And one of the things I couldn't understand about him, I was a very inquisitive child. And I couldn't understand why he never talked about what took place there. As a matter of fact, I did not even know he had robes because in those days, they did not allow women into Masonic temples. And they had an anniversary, and my mother was invited to accompany him. And I remember briefing her. At the time I must have been 13. And I'm briefing her, when you get there, you need to do, you have a little pad. And I want to know exactly what the environment is. What is it that they're teaching there that, my father would never talk about? So I stayed up. And when the door opened, my mother walked in, and I think she was like in a trance for 3 days. Because she said when she got there, it was a dinner, and they sat at the dinner table, etc. And at a certain point, he indicated that he had some involvement in, what would take place. And so he excused himself from the table. And when the curtain on the stage was drawn, there was my father in all these robes. It was just the most amazing thing to my mother. And it's kind of like by the time she came home, she was in like almost like a trance. Because he had never said to her that he didn't just attend the Masonic temple, he had a role there. So for the very first time, she saw him in robes. And I think it took her a whole week before she would even talk about the incident. And so I grew up with beautiful classical music. Music was always around. He came to church with us on a Sunday, but on a Friday night, he went to church at the Masonic temple, you see. And he was an educator, and his goal was that every child who had a brain should be educated, whether or not their family, because in those days, you got education up to the elementary level, and after that, in Guyana, you had to pay for high school. You had to pay for, and a lot of parents could not afford that. So he spent a lot of time. And when I look back on it now, he would take me with him. He would take me with him when he would kind of discover a kid that's really got a brain, and the father might just be a farmer, and we would go to visit. And my father would talk about the fact that he taught at a high school that the parents should find a way, and he would help them to find a way to not let this brain that has a capacity go to waste, you know. And to this day, I remember us going to a farmer, and he was turning the mowing the land, and my father's talking about, you have this child, and it was a girl, and she's got this brain, and he's of the opinion that she should be sent to high school. And there were a group of teachers who would help assist the family, you see. And this man stopped and he looked at my father and he says, I got 12 children. 8 of them are boys. Even if I could afford it, do you think I would spend the money on a girl? Because in those days, you see, the men ruled, women did not work. You have to understand. Women got married and they were housekeepers and they raised children. They did not, there wasn't even space, jobs for them to do. And so this farmer was outraged at the fact that my father was saying that his daughter. But anyway, my father kept on and on and on and on until he agreed. And later, much later on in life, she was able to go to the University of the West Indies and came back to Guyana to provide services. So I grew up to a background of classical music. We did not have television. And my father would turn to the stations in London, which of course would be late at night, so that he can listen to classical music. And I would set my pillow and my blanket in such a way as though I'm in the bed. And I would get under the bed, you see, so that I can listen to this beautiful music that is, being played. So I grew up to the background of a lot of well-structured music, an educator who really believed that education was the key to unlock the doors of poverty. And he was a giver. If you're in the Masons, you give to community. And I have this image of every month, he got paid once a month. He had this little table, and he would come home with this little table. And in those days, you got paid in an envelope. You got paid with money in an envelope. And he would sit at this little desk with a group of envelopes. And then he would divide up this money, the actual money. This is for the rent. This is for electricity. This is for my mother. And always there were 2 envelopes for people who were in need. But the thing that I couldn't understand was why the next morning I had to be woken up early so I can go deliver these 2 envelopes. And I would say to my mother, well, why can't he deliver it? But later on, I understood why. If he delivered it, my mother delivered it, they would feel like they're getting charity. But when it came by virtue of a child, and sometimes he would say to me, you need to wait for an answer. And they would open that envelope, and very often I would watch them. They'd open the envelope and they go, thank you, Lord, because these are people who are really in need. And sometimes he might have said, well, one of the kids may be involved in sports, but they have no shoes. So he wants to know what the size of the shoes are. So I grew up with this thing that if you are a little bit more advanced in the poverty around you, it's your responsibility to participate. So that was my childhood. And I grew up with this. Education is the key that unlocks the door to poverty. I got married for the very first time at 19. And if you read the book, it's amazing. It's still amazing to me that at the age we were in high school together, and he kept talking about, this young man kept talking about he wanted to be educated and he wanted to be able to go to college. And in those days, there wasn't a university in Guyana. And so, how are you going to do that? To do that, you'd have to get to England. And I always remember him saying, I don't know how I'll do it, but say, help me, God, I will. So I became very fascinated. And I said, well, where are you going to start? And he said, well, I don't have a passport. So the first place to start is go get a passport. And he did. And then he came to my home and he said, look, I've got a passport. Well, now I'm intrigued because his mother has got 9 children. And his father just walked away and left her with his 9 children. And I'm like, how are you going to do this? You know, the price to get even a fare to London. And apart from anything else, do you know any white people? Because you have to be invited by a. He says, no, I don't, but I'll always remember. Turn his eyes to heaven and he made a sign of the cross. He said, but so help me God, I will. And believe it or not, he did. He did. It's a long story. It's in the book, how it came about, but God made a way. And I think for the very first time, I came alive to the fact that God will make a way if you're serious about what it is you want to accomplish. Now, once he got it accomplished, it took a couple of years after high school. And he came to my father and he asked my father to give him instructions. And my father said, well, start with a home study course that will provide the math and the advanced teaching that you did not get, et cetera, et cetera. And then a whole set of circumstances happened and someone was willing to provide the invitation. And I remembered him coming to me and he says, you kept asking, how am I going to do this? Well, I've now got a sponsor. See what I'm saying? And by then he had finished high school and was working. And I said, you know, I'm going to miss you because you've been supplying this information that's just blowing my mind. And he said, no, you're not. I'm going to ask your parents to marry you. And I was like, I was really whatever. And he did. And my father said no at first. Because my father was, you're asking to marry my daughter. You want to go to England and study. You have no family in England to support you. How are you going to, you know? And then, you know what happens when daughters start crying? My father eventually said, well, you know, I'll agree. And that was my first marriage. And after I got married, he left first for London. And then he later sponsored us. And so I spent about 10 years of my life in London, where I got most of my education. But amidst all of that story, I'm sure you could feel and see it was God's way of helping me to understand that when we surrender ourselves to Almighty God, He will make a way. Make a way. So we had 5 children, 3 of which were born. 1 was born in Guyana, 3 of which were born in England. And of course, I have an American. I had to have an American. So we have an international family. And my father's wish, when he died, he left me in charge of, he said he wanted a eulogy that should not be more than 1/2 a page. Because he said his purpose in life was to educate, not just in the classroom, but to educate people and allow them to remember and experience what it is that God put into their hands. And so he said he didn't want a long eulogy, but he just wanted, because he believed that he lived out his purpose. So I grew up with this idea that you have a purpose, and somehow you have got to reach within and manifest that purpose. That was kind of like very real to me when I was growing up. So here we are in London, and I'm pregnant. And I didn't even know I was pregnant. I was just having this morning sicknesses and so on and so forth. I was away from work for a couple of weeks, and even though I was not feeling well, I had to return to work. And on the day I returned to work, I collapsed in an elevator. And there was Indian young woman. I knew she was Indian because she had a dot on her forehead and she had an Indian sari. She was the only person in the elevator. God bless her soul. When the elevator door opened, she got people to help her. And because the hospital was only 2 blocks away, they put me in a cab. And that was my first near-death experience. I blacked out. I remember coming back into consciousness, and I was a trolley, and they were moving me into an operating room because, see, the baby had died inside of me. And they're asking me questions, but I was kind of like, I wasn't able to answer the questions. So a cab driver drove off. He had helped the young lady get me into the hospital. He drove off with my handbag. She didn't know who I was. And I couldn't tell her who I was. So they called the police and I had no handbag with me. And the police found my husband. Now, during the time that I was out, which was just under an hour, I did a lot of things. I went through a very, very dark tunnel, even though I was not afraid. And at the end of the tunnel, there was this phenomenal light, glorious, beautiful light. And I entered the light. And when I entered the light, I experienced love. Now, there are no words. I don't care how intellectual you may be to try to describe this word love. There are no words to describe what it really feels like to experience divine love. Felt like I was covered with this just beautiful, beautiful love. And there was this beautiful light. There was light everywhere. And again, you could kind of like feel the love of the light that surrounds you. Life on the other side is, oh my goodness. And as soon as I landed, I wondered if there were other people there, because at first, I came into this like, are there people here? And as soon as the thought came to me, I was taken to, it was like, there was a lot of water. And on the other side of this little, I wouldn't call it a river, but it was a waterway. On the other side of the waterway were all my family members who had been deceased. And my baby that I had just, that had died inside of me. They were all there waiting to welcome me. And they gave me this beautiful welcome, but there was water between us, you see. And there were souls there that I could not remember them, but I could feel the love that connected us, this loving feeling. And then from there, I was transported because I was thinking, well, what else is there around here? I was very quickly transported to another level. And it seemed to me like I traveled with the light. The light was the means of taking me there. And when I got there, now I am looking at the biggest television screen I've ever seen in my life. They still haven't built them as big as that. And the screen was divided into different sections. And I'm now observing my lifetimes that I have lived. And the very first one was quite amusing because obviously in those days they had no electricity. And people were really living close to nature. And I'm reviewing these lifetimes as I go along, because later on I'm going to be told that I had finally lived enough lifetimes on earth to balance out whatever karma there was from these different lifetimes, if you can see that. But one of the lifetimes I recognized that I was Paul in the lifetime before. I recognized myself as being, we were at the ocean. We're all women and children. We're at an ocean. And the lifetime in which I lived, there was war going on between two groups, you see. And the group that my family and I lived in were losing the war, and they were afraid that if they lost enough women, they would not be able to procreate and build up. So they took the women and the children to the ocean, and there they had boats, and they put us in boats, and they put food and water in there, prayed, and pushed us out to sea in the hope that we would survive. And the boat I was in overturned, and I died of drowning. I was drowned. There was another experience, and it's kind of like I'm watching the screen, but I'm living the experience, if you know what I mean. If there's pain in the experience, I'm feeling it. If it's sadness, I'm feeling it. If it's joy, I'm feeling it. But I'm watching the screen. And then there was one screen that that has kind of like fascinated me to this day. I'm a child. I'm a Black child. And I'm with my mother in the fields, and we're picking cotton. And you know, you got rows and rows and rows of cotton. And in the row behind us, I could hear the master man on his horse. And those who were not picking enough cotton to his satisfaction, I could hear the whip on their back, you see. And so I'm scared because I'm a child, and I'm picking with my mother, you see. And when I'm afraid that when he comes wrong on the horse, he would discover that I can't meet my quota, and I'm afraid I'd get the whip on my back. But then when he comes around the corner, the screen changed, and I am now the massive white man on a horse, whipping the slaves. That was an indication that in one lifetime I was a child and I was subjected to it. And then in the next lifetime, I was the master man, see? And that particular piece of that information has stayed with me very consciously throughout this lifetime. We live every single experience that we're required to live. We're amassing memory. Earth is a school, the best school on the planet. And we descend to Earth so that we may learn, you see. And we have to learn the good, the bad, and the indifferent. And we learn it by way of experience. One lifetime you're rich, another lifetime you're poor. One lifetime you're Christian, another lifetime you're Hindu. Because we are living, or we're trying to live every experience, as many experiences as we can, before we graduate from planet Earth. So that experience just stayed with me. And then from there, I was taken back to the river. And there's all these family members there, and there's a lot of love. And my aunt, who was the kind of the most recent person who had died in my family, she stepped into the water and she encouraged me so that we could meet in the middle of this waterway. And when we met, she looked at me and she says, I'm sorry, you have to return. And I said, why? This is a beautiful place. I'm feeling love. I'm experiencing light. I'm experiencing glory. I don't want to go back. Now you have to understand, I had a son back there, you know, one that I loved. I don't want to go back. And she said, I'm sorry, we're sending you back. And I said, why? Because I am thinking now, well, I am not, was I a bad person that you're sending me back? And they said, no, we're sending you back with a message. And when you get there, you will deliver the message. And the message was, love is divine. God is love. And love, when it hits the density of the earth, turns into light, and light is stored creation. And with that, I found myself falling away from this beautiful, beautiful place of love and light and everybody agreeing so well with each other. And I hit my body in the hospital bed and became conscious of pain, excruciating pain. And my journey to return and again now align myself with this thing called life began. And that was very difficult. I was obsessed with killing myself so that I could get back to the other side. And I tried that twice and it didn't work. And the third time, I thought I had planned it very well, And I remember I had my first child at the time. By then he was 5. And bathed him, showered him, fed him, put clean clothes on him, sent him outside to play. And there I was standing in the bathroom with my hands full of the exact amount of pills that I needed because I had taken time to get very close to a neighbor of mine who was a nurse so that I could find out exactly what it is that these people use that allow themselves to die. I sent him out to play and I'm standing over the toilet and I'm saying the last prayer, a glass of water in one hand, and the other, my pills. And my son comes running into the bathroom. And he says, Mother, look what I found. And when he opened his hand, it was a caterpillar, half of which was a butterfly, and the other half was caterpillar. And I stood there and I looked at him and something just made me dump the pills into the toilet and pick up my son and ran with him to the playground. And today he's a grown man and we have a very, very close relationship. Took him to the playground and turned my eyes to heaven and said, God, you will have to help me to adjust because it was very difficult to adjust to life here and now. And the first thing is I went back to the Bible. And believe you me, every holy book has got everything you need inside of it. But guess what? We've got kindergartners interpreting a PhD level book. And you wouldn't do that in a college, would you? So what we're getting is a kindergarten's version of the interpretation rather than the spiritual interpretation as it should be. I came so you can have life and have it more abundantly. What do you think he's talking about? Came to remind us life does not end. It moves from one place to another. And the place it moves to is, oh my God, love, glory, light, joy, interaction, never a whisper that will upset you. I didn't see any of that. And so then my very first spiritual teacher entered my life. And he was a pastor, but I never shared with him the near-death experience because at that time I thought they would put me in a mental institution. I'd never heard of somebody dying and coming back. So I shut my mouth, but I asked a lot of questions. And so the journey began with my learning. And then much later, my ex-husband and I, we got our education in England, and then we returned to Guyana to give back. And there I met my 90-year-old, oh my God, coach. You wouldn't believe this. He could not read and he could not write. But he was so in love with the Bible that he would sleep with it strapped to his stomach and asked Almighty God to transform the information into his consciousness. And so God did. When we began the work, never told him I had a near-death experience, but I had a feeling that he knew. And so we began the reading of the Bible from Genesis all the way in, but with interpreting it through the eyes of spirituality. And so you get a whole different interpretation of, like, for example, when the old man would say to me, he said, there's something wrong with churches. You go to church and they tell you to demand of God what you want. But quite frankly, you don't know what you need. So that term, thy will be done, is what you should live by. And he began to teach me that. I said, you come before Almighty God, you thank him for the day, you thank him for your situation in life, and then you shut up. And you say, well, Father God, I'm here in silence, I'm waiting, guide me, show me, teach me. And that's how he got the whole Bible transformed into his consciousness. And so he began to put me on that pathway. And so it took a couple of years for us to reread the entire Bible. He said, I came so you can have life and have more abundantly. What, you think he was lying? That has to do a lot with the we die, we go, he's the record, and he's establish another lifetime, and we come. And when we have learned everything we need to learn, then there's no need anymore to come back to school and whatever. Altogether, I've had 8 spiritual teachers. And of the 8, only one knew that I had a near-death experience because I was too scared to tell people because I was afraid they were going to put me in a mental institution. I want to stop there. Questions?
I wanted to make a few comments. And the first thing is, in your story, you spoke about when we are beginning our journey into an incarnation. There are individuals there to teach us. We are shown the opportunities that are coming, and that this process of entering into an incarnation is not like a chicken lays an egg and the egg just drops into a hole and suddenly here you are in an incarnation.
We wish.
Yeah. So, I want to say what you were talking about, and also what you talked about in your book, Awakening, was the very experience I had. I was given the choice to enter into a body of a child that would become very severely disabled, brain damaged, and would have a very horrible, painful life. But I would burn off a significant amount of karma where I would not have to reincarnate. Or door number 2, if I waited a year. Now, there were spiritual guides with me, and I was conscious of this process. And if I waited exactly a year, things would have been aligned to where I would have been able to work with the spiritual teachers that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been able to communicate through talks and workshops and my music and be able to assist others in awakening. Right. So I weighed the two, but the guidance I was receiving from the spiritual beings was, we're offering you an opportunity to fulfill your spiritual destiny. Mm-hmm. And your spiritual destiny is of service, not to get out of jail quickly, And we'll talk a little bit about getting out of jail because I want to touch that part in the book. But the point I wanted to make was our process of coming into an incarnation is incredibly planned. There are a tremendous amount of beings there who are helping us.
Mhm.
We are being prepared. We are being downloaded because I had later experiences of the downloading into this lifetime of all that information and then it being packaged and sort of like a time release capsule you take.
That's right.
It was like, you're going to get this now, and then later you're going to get this, and you're going to get this. So I wanted to make that point to everyone that your experience, my experience, there is not this incarnation we are living, and what we've experienced is not an accident. There was amount of divine compassion and grace in preparing the learning curriculum that we would agree to that would help us awaken and in return help others awaken.
That's correct.
And for those who, if you'd like to check out this information in Norma's book, Awakening, just go to Amazon and it's right there. And you can get that and read about that experience. But I wanted to bring that out, not only for the folks who are watching and listening tonight, but you all will know someone who needs to hear that everything we are experiencing in this incarnation was part of a very loving agreement and a very loving preparation that the divine has worked with. And it's not just this lifetime, it's all the other lifetimes previous. And it's all the processes of leaving this physical lifetime with a great amount of love and care and purpose and information and training and counseling and all of that. So I wanted to thank you, Norma, for bringing that out in your stories and also in your book. Um, I, I will take a question. What I'm hoping is we're going to get through some of the question and answers I have with Norma, and then we're going to open it up to everybody. But Jocelyn, did you want to ask a question, a burning question that you had? You'll have to unmute, and we're not hearing you. Is your microphone on? No, still not hearing you. Um, why don't you send me your question and I'll read it to Norma while you work with your microphone. Okay. So Norma, you talked about how this experience was a watershed experience for you to awaken. Later on, you had a divine experience where you were given insight into part of your spiritual purpose for this lifetime.
Yes.
And in your book, you talked about in being in your car, and then the divine voice or the voice of your guides told you the work that you needed to do, and it was not anything you had ever thought about doing. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because we're all everyone here can relate to that experience of,
Oh dear. Yes, so here I am. I'm in the United States of America, and of course, I over the years, I can remember everything that happened in that near-death experience, but I can't. And I knew they told me what my purpose was, but I couldn't remember it. And later on, I realized why. Because if they'd let me know when I wanted the answer, I would not have been prepared to be able to do it, you see. So here we are, left England, went back to Guyana, spent some years in Guyana, came to America to educate these children. And I'm driving in the car one day, and I'm obsessed with this thing. Why can't I remember that? And I'm driving in the car, and the voice said, find a space and park. We want to talk to you. So I find a space. I get off the beltway, find a space, I park the car and said, okay, here am I. What do you want to say? And they drop one word, prison. Now you have to understand, I'm a Black woman living in Washington, D.C. I have 5 children. 3 of them are boys. And there's a whole lot of black males being locked up all the time, you see. And I'm thinking, prison? Does it mean one of my children are going to end up in prison? Oh my God, am I going to end up in prison? Just one word. So I get in the car and I drive to my pastor. Because at that time I was studying to become a pastor. And I explained this to her, and she says, it seems to me that you're assuming that either you or your children or somebody in your family is going to get locked up. But that might not be the case at all, you know. It ever occurred to you that maybe you've been asking about your life purpose? It might have something to do with your life purpose. So I drove around and around and around, and I can't settle with this at all, you see, because Black people are being locked up in prisons like crazy. And I think it was that night I had a dream. And in the dream, I saw myself enter the prison, and I saw myself leave the prison. And the voice in my head said, did you notice that you entered with the clothes you were wearing, and you left with the clothes you were wearing? So you must have been there for a visit.
You didn't leave with orange pajamas. Yes.
So now I'm like, oh my God, what would I be doing with? Now I'm thinking, you know, one of my children going to get locked up or something like that. And I'm worried about this. And again, you have to pay attention to the experiences you have. Woke up that one morning and the air conditioning in my car is not working. And I have to be at work at 12 o'clock. So I'm driving to the mechanic with the windows down. You know, windows are not working. And I come up to a stoplight. And on the right hand side of me, really the person in the right hand corner should have been turning. There was this young man, and he was in a red sports car, and he had the top down. There's a piece of music playing, and it was Bob Marley. And just as the light started to change from yellow to, you know, red, the line that came out of Bob Marley's mouth, the biggest man you ever did see was once a baby. And I held on to that line. Oh, so they want me to go into prison to help rescue prisoners. And they want me to know that the biggest man you ever did see was born a baby. He didn't born a criminal. So you can't go in there thinking of him as a criminal. You got to go in there thinking of what experiences did he have that took him there, and what experiences God may give to you that you can help. And that started my journey. As a matter of fact, how it got started, I was afraid of guns, mortally afraid of guns, because when you grow up in Guyana, you grow up in England, officers don't walk around with guns. So when I came to America, one of the things I was mortally afraid of is that, oh my God, if a police officer pulled me over, he might shoot me, you see, because I'd never seen officers with guns on them. So I'm mortally afraid of that. And I held on to that statement. When I look at them, if I can see them as babies and not as criminals, I might be able to overcome my feelings, you see. And then the opportunity presented itself, because I was not going to go look for the opportunity. But by then now, I'm now reading up about the statistics and so on and so on and so forth. And had this friend, and she worked for Howard University. It's a Saturday morning. She called me up and she says, we've got a conference here. And my keynote speaker just called to say his mother died, and he's on his way to North Carolina. And I could have to find a keynote speaker in the next 2 hours. So we began to call people, and everybody we called, you know, had some engagement or might be speaking somewhere else. And so I said to her, I'll come down to Howard University to support her. And then she looked at me and she says, "You've got some ideas. Why don't you?" So I said, "Oh no, this is Howard University, you know. And if you never attended Howard University, they're not going to invite you to speak." Well, we're half an hour before the conference starts, and she says, "You know, even if you just kind of give your opinion, you know, so on and so forth." And she got someone to get up and welcome the audience. And he was considered what they call the czar in Washington, D.C., as a psychologist, helping people to overcome drug addiction. And so she asked him, and he said he had to speak at a conference at 2:00, but he would do the invitation, you know, welcome. You would welcome the gathering and give her enough time to find somebody to put on the stage, you see. And he did that. He did the welcome. And when he did the welcome, when he was leaving the stage, I think something stirred in him. And he agreed with my friend that an idea that I had, I'd never met him before. And so between the two of them, they talked me into it. You got this idea about, you know, how families should get together to ensure that their kids don't end up in prison and so on and so on and so forth. And I was like, it was just an idea, you see what I'm saying? Never worked in prisons or anything like that. And he said, "You know what? I'll be sitting right here." He said, "I have to speak at 2:00, but I'll be sitting here right here to send you energy, you know." And I mounted the stage with fear, but there he was sitting, and I noticed that because he had said I'd have to leave at a certain time. So if you see me leave and get up, it's because I have this other. He stayed, he didn't leave. He called someone and asked that person to deliver the speech on his behalf. And when I walked off the stage, he looked at me and he said, "Wednesday, 12 noon, DC jail. I want you to show up. I'll be there. We need to have a conversation." And when I showed up at what, 11:00, because I'd never been to a jail before. I'm scared. Remember, I'm scared of guns. And I'm sitting in the parking lot and I'm watching people come and go. And I'm like, well, what if I go in there and I don't come back up? But my guides gave me you go on, we got you covered. And I walked in and put me through they got to check you all out and so on. And we walked into this room, and in the room, there were a group of male prisoners, and they were in a circle. And he stepped into the circle, and I noticed he lowered his voice. And he said, "Gentlemen, I brought you your next counselor." It said nothing to me about counseling. She's a woman, and I would expect you to treat her with respect. And I'm standing there thinking, is he nuts or something? And the journey began. 27 years. I carried classes of 35 prisoners, and each class ran for about a year, sometimes 2. And eventually I became the very first person to be contracted by the federal government to take spiritual principles, drop it into clinical practice, and work with prisoners in prison. And I did that not only with prisoners in prison, but I also did that on death row with people who lost their appeals and had to be prepared for execution. It's been an incredible journey. It has taught me a lot about life, love, and living. But above all, what I had to teach to them and what I had to say to them was backed up by the fact that, yes, I had died and I went to the other side, and I can tell you of the glory of the other side, and that the moment, whatever it is going to take your life is over, the pain is gone, and you are in joy. and happiness. 27 years. I followed families. I worked with women who, when they left prison, the children were kind of like people volunteered to take care of their children and might end up loving their children so much they want to adopt them. So when they come out of prison, they need help to be able to go claim their children. You see what I'm saying? So I did a lot of work with women who were leaving prison and had to reestablish life. And I worked a lot with men who were long-term prisoners and gave us the opportunity to kind of like guide their process, because you see, you're confined in a facility. You're not out there running off to parties and doing drugs and what have you. Took a lot, helped to take a lot of souls who were addicted off of drugs. And very instructive and very interesting period. 27 years till I retired.
Your story, Norma, has some very beautiful threads that all tie together. You told us earlier in your story about how you recognize that music and frequency, vibration through music has the opportunity to help a soul awaken and maintain our awakened state of consciousness. And you used, in your book, you talk about in Awakening, you talk about how not only did you use your ability to help them see themselves not as criminals, but as souls who had made a choice, learning a lesson, but that no matter what, they were loved by the divine, and they had meaning, and they all had a purpose. But you also used music to help them rise above. Could you talk a little bit about the power of music, vibration, healing, and awakening?
I usually say to my clients when people call me and they ask they want to be counseled. And so the first thing I need to do, I need to get a list of your music. What music entertains you? Because give me half an hour with that list and I can tell you exactly where you are and what it is you need to work on. Because, we know this, the music that entertained you in your teenagehood and your 20s and your 30s, we tend to hold on to it. And we don't understand that what we're doing is holding on to something that is tied to that time of your life when you were not as serious as you should be. And so I usually say to my clients, I'd like to have 15 minutes. List what it is. Look at your music you've gathered in your life and make a list, give it to me. And 15 minutes after I've got that list, I can tell that person exactly where they are on the spiritual scale and say to them, you have got to improve the music you are consuming because it has frequencies that can raise your vibration. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And so we started every class with music. And of course, I had said to the guys, I said, if there's anything that you want to express or something that you're not comfortable with, I encourage them, get together as a group. And when I come back on Monday, we will talk about it. See? So I showed up on Monday morning and this young man got up and says, well, I was asked to bring the complaints. Why do you bring music in here that we don't like? And I said, well, what kind of music do you like? Well, I won't even tell you the name of the piece of music that I was given. I was horrified. And then I explained to them that we carry frequencies within us. And if we are carrying frequencies that has drawn us into negative behavior, and we keep listening to music that is catered for negative behavior, we'll never get out of it. I said, and so what I'm trying to do is like feed rhythmic patterns that are about love and about light. And of course, the music that I use has no words. And it's classical music. And and I said, I'll talk to the librarian because they all had opportunities to go to the library. And they had music. They had classical music in the library. I said, no, you can go to the library and you can take the disc out, and there's someplace there where you can sit there and you can actually play it. I said, because the frequencies that come out of this well-orchestrated music enter the body, enter the mind, enter the soul and the spirit, and before long, it transforms you. So what would you believe? I show up the next week and this young man put his hand up. I have a question, he says. I said, what's the question? Have you ever heard of Mozart? I said, where did you hear about Mozart? He said, well, the lady, he went and he wanted to see what they had available and so on. And the lady recommended Mozart's music. Have you ever heard of Mozart? Well, it took me a good 5 minutes of laughter before I can answer the question, you see. And so we began this journey of, we would start our classes, 2 pieces of classical music. We would talk about it. We would talk about the frequencies. We talk about the fact that each person resonates on a particular frequency, and the music and the rhythmic patterns that you consume will bring you more to that place where you can begin to transform who you are into something better. And oh my God, after a while, I had to get myself connected with a classical music station to keep up with them. And one of the things that I would do is I would bring in volunteers into the prison. And you couldn't diverge their names, you see. So I would put a number on each chair, in the back of each chair. And then we start off with 2 classical music pieces. And these volunteers were trained to observe body language as they're listening to the music. And then they would make a note. Now, as soon as the session is over, I would sit with them and they would say, well, the person sitting in chair number 3, his body language reacted to Mozart. And I'll take that because now I know that's the music, that's the rhythmic pattern that would improve his vibrations. And that's how we began the process. After a while, my God, they ended up getting more information from the library than I could give them on music. And today, even if I run into 1 or 2 of them today, they will talk about, I'm listening. As a matter of fact, there's a musician, he's not American, and he has this beautiful piece of music called Querida, and it's an ex-prisoner that pointed me in his direction. Because music is the key that will begin to change the frequencies, you see. And once the frequencies are changed, you can begin to rise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's 2 things that you brought out in that. And number 1 is we all have a unique frequency and pattern as individual souls, and each soul has a unique frequency pattern to it. And if we learn that pattern, if we learn what stimulates and inspires it and what brings it down, we can begin to have a deeper communication with ourself as soul. The other thing you talked about in your book is the divine is showering the world with divine sound frequency, which becomes light, divine light and sound. And that part of our process of awakening is to devote ourselves to the discipline each day of, you talked about in the morning, of tuning into that light and sound and frequency coming direct from the divine, taking it in, absorbing it, and then through the day, looking to see where is it taking me? Where is it guiding me? What is it trying to teach me? And that the more and more we do that, the more our vibrations raise.
That's
And we are moving closer to our own awakening, but also closer to our own purpose. And what I found interesting in your talk about the prison and also in your book, um, what you described about what you were doing with the prisoners is actually what our spiritual guides and teachers and masters are doing with us, because the prison of ignorance of our divinity is the same as being behind bars
oh
in
yes.
a prison of,
Mhm.
Rikers Island or whatever prison you're talking about. And, some great teachers have told us we are prisoners, but we're holding the key to our cell right in our own hands, in our
Mhm.
own hearts. And all we need to do is understand we have the opportunity, the ability, and the responsibility to do the work. And you talked about this. We have the opportunity, responsibility to do the spiritual work that can help raise our vibrations to attract the help we need because they're waiting for us to be consciously aware of what they're trying to show us and to be able to move and grow to experience greater levels
That's right.
of heaven. And you talked about you've experienced many dimensions,
Yes.
and
Even
many
as far as the 16th.
wow. Okay, so divine love can carry us to the highest points in the heavens and galaxies if we do the work. And this was important, what I got from your book. We must be willing to do the work. It's not something that's given to us, it's an opportunity given to us, but we must do the work to manifest it in our consciousness. And that I appreciate you putting that in the book and explaining that because that's really important for us to understand. And each of us, the work is unique to each of us,
That's right.
and our ability to serve is unique to each of us.
And the
But we
more
could,
we serve, is the more we open up ourselves to receiving light. Service
that's,
is the key. Service is
yeah,
service is
yeah,
the key. You know, I'm just moved to share this, and I'll be quick with it. I get in there one morning because usually after a while they created a contract. At first I was volunteering and I was volunteering in the evening. And then I remember Dr. Orman said to me, gosh, I just wish I could hire you. And eventually they created a contract. So I get in there one morning and there is a gentleman sitting in the space where it's like 2 hours before the class starts. And he's got his stuff with him. And apparently, he just got transferred from one prison to another. He went through two prisons before he got to where he needed to be. And I'd never heard of something like that. Apparently his family had money and so on. But he had heard about what it is I was doing in Washington, D.C. And he got himself transferred. So here he is, he's sitting. And when the class started now, I was working with Miles Davis piece of music. And he's sitting in his chair. And it's a piece of Miles music that really shifts vibration. It really does. And it's time after time. A piece of music was time after time. And he's sitting in the chair and he closes his eyes and I open mine and I realize his spirit is out of his body. It's just above his head, see? And I start directing and I said, now you're going to go through a tunnel, stretch, etc. Don't be afraid, blah, 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 blah. And I took him all the way to the 8th. 1 and 2 and 3. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, 4, 5. And this guide is saying to me, keep going. We'll tell you when it's time to stop. It took him to the 8th. And he was there and I could see him in all his glory, man. So I kind of left him there as long as I possibly could. And then as the music begins to descend, now I had to very quickly bring him back. So he opens his eyes now, and now I'm thinking, how am I going to explain to this man what happened? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You left it a little bit late, didn't you?" I said, "Well, you were having such a good time. I figured because, you got to come back before that last note." And he went on to take a course to finish his high school while he was still incarcerated. And then after that, he started doing a home study course. When he left, he went back to school and came back to work beside me as a coach. I think it's a privilege to watch people shift frequency and climb. You know what I mean? It has been quite an interesting experience. Music is the key because we're made up of frequencies. We're carrying frequencies, and sometimes we get drawn to the frequency that is beneath what we're capable of, and we get stuck there. Like when I meet people and they're still listening to the music they were listening to when they were 16 and they're now 80, something's wrong. You're stuck. And so you lift them up by feeding the frequency that their soul requires. And once you do that, it becomes a little easier to break out of drug problems, etc.
And they can feed that frequency with chanting and meditation and listening to the inner music,
Yeah,
in addition to listening to the outer music, and that's really important. I think at this point, if you don't mind, Norma, I'd like to open it up to questions, and we'll pick up again. Before we go to questions, Norma's book, Awakening, please take a look at it. Also, Norma is here partly because of the graciousness of Spiritual Awakenings International, and they have a conference coming up. And what I respect about this group is that it's made up of people from all religions, all spiritual paths, all types of experience. And it's basically people sharing their experiences, the enlightenments that they are receiving, and trying to help each other learn and grow in whatever direction or path you choose to. There are many of folks here that are from a spiritual path that I've been involved in, but there's folks here also watching who are from different paths. So um, with that, I want to open up to questions. I know, Jocelyn, you've been patient. Did you have a question for Norma? And then we'll take some other questions. Oh, still can't hear you. Yeah, still can't hear you. You have my email address. Do you want to type up a quick email, send it to me, and I'll ask Norma. In the meantime, also folks who are live on Facebook, we've got quite a few people watching on Facebook. And by the way, some of the folks are saying, Norma, you're a blessing, and I agree. You're a very special soul, and I totally agree. So thank you for sharing those comments, folks. Is there anyone in the Zoom audience or Facebook that has a question before we move on to some of the other things we want to talk about in the final minutes? Don't be shy. We won't bite.
I know if I were listening to this, I'd have a million questions.
And the good part is there are going to be people watching tonight, tomorrow, the week, that follows. And we'll make sure that the questions that you have get to me, and then I'll give them to Norma.
Can I ask a
While we're,
question?
yeah, Brian, please.
Well, I was wondering, Are you in the Christian faith? I'm curious. You're a reverend.
Yes, I am.
Are you following? Who do you follow for your inner guide? Who do you follow now? I ask.
Well, God
Okay.
is still the center of my world, but guess what? I now know that you and I are pieces that make up God. It's not some being way out there that we can't touch and we can't reach. We're all a part of the body. And I do believe that, I know, not believe, I know there's a God. And I know he dwells within me, dwells within you, he dwells within those criminals. But guess what? Before we came to earth, we planned a life so that we may begin to understand experiences and allow experience to bring wisdom to us. And before we can leave Mother Earth completely, there are a series of experiences that we must have. And since I came back and I have sight, I can look at someone who may be living on the streets and go, wow, he's been a king 3 times in 3 other lifetimes. What is it that he had to learn in this one? And this one was probably the last. You see. When you have sight, you can see, and it begins to make sense. It's like going to school. Until you graduate from high school, you are not going to be able to go to college. Until you graduate from the school called life and all that it has to offer, you can't really enter another dimension. And so we write these experiences into the lifetime before we come. And then we have to descend while we in the spirit and request of peace. See that person who really hated you in this life and you really thought kind of like wasn't very nice and bad. You requested of that soul.
Yes.
Man, you's my friend, you know me. When I get there, I've had 4 or 5 lifetimes trying to shake this. I can't shake it. You know my habits. You know me inside out. I want you to play devil's advocate so I can unwind myself. That's the story.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't know about you guys, but Lord, when I had a million questions. My poor mother and father, you know. My mother used to make a sign of the cross. Here she comes with another question. So for me, yes, God is very real, but he lives within me. He's not up there in the sky somewhere. He's within me.
And we are blessed to have the guidance of the inner voice, which is the divine voice speaking to us. But we've also are provided with teachers, masters, guides, angels. We are never, never, never alone. And we are always being inspired and guided and protected and helped if we're willing to develop the inner sight, if we're willing to develop a relationship with them, because they cannot really help us until we ask to develop a relationship. And it's the same with God and divine spirit. It's important to develop a relationship, just like with a spouse or a partner. It's important to create a partnership with the divine and with those who are waiting to help us. And once we do, it is a love affair that is beyond words, beyond description.
And if I may add
Please,
there, you what you just said is absolutely true. But if I may add there,
please.
that sometimes the person that you see is really, really, really annoying you. It's the person that you asked, you begged, and you requested them to be that because they probably know you very well and understand your field and how it flows. And so they agree to be the devil's advocate. And then when you leave this life, when you get to the other side, you will give thankfulness for the service that has been provided.
We've all negotiated contracts with each other as soul to assist each other. And sometimes the method of assistance is joyful and positive and enjoyable, and sometimes it's really tough, hard, and very painful. But everything that happens to us is part of those contracts, an agreement with spirit, everything. Norma, here's a question from Jocelyn.
Mm.
Knowing some of your past lives and meeting people, how did that help you in this lifetime? Did you recognize some of those people you lived with in these lifetimes are back with you? If so, did that affect your experience with them in this lifetime?
Oh, yes, there are quite a few. There are quite a few. My present husband is one of them. I have found children that I have had in past lives, and they're very much involved in my lifetime now. Because at first I won't tell them, Sometimes we walk together. I have raised 5 children, but I swear to God, there are about 12 children out there call me mom. And they found their way into my life because I can see that we walked before. And many of them may have started off, or somebody would look at that and go, well, they were walking on the wrong path. But then I can see, hey, this is a child of mine, you see. And I wrote it into my plan that we got to fix whatever that pattern is. So yes, very often I can recognize when we've walked together. And usually, sometimes I'll say it and sometimes I won't. So that's the answer to your question. We don't run into people by accident. It's written in the plan. See, it might be written in my plan, or it might be written in their plan. But it's written in the plan. Any other questions? Even today, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I have another question, if I may ask again.
Sure.
So when you meet somebody that you don't get along too well with, and you had a contract coming into this, how do you react? This person drives you crazy in this lifetime. How do you not create more karma, or whatever you wish to call that? I mean, how do you resolve that issue you had with this person?
You see, first of all, and I'm sure Mike would agree with me. I'm hoping you would agree with me on this. We write the manuscript before we come. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And now, once you start walking in what I call the field of remembrance, you kind of can sense when you've walked with somebody before. And not just sense, you come to know. You come to know that you've walked with this person. And so what begins to happen is you are going to step back and listen to what they have to say. Whereas if you're not conscious of the fact that you may have walked with them before and you sign this agreement, it will be a constant irritation. But when you have this sense that you signed an agreement, and this agreement is for both of your betterment, you tend to step back now and ask, okay, what is the agreement that you ask them, what is the agreement I have with this person? I mean, I have pushed 5 children into the world. She says 6 because I married one. I have pushed 6 children in the world, but I swear to God, I've found as many as 10 who are children of mine. And they found their way into my life under many, many different circumstances. I went all the way to Japan and found one there. But as your consciousness begin to develop, you see, you become more aware. This person will find their way into your home, and all of a sudden you're like, why do I feel like I know him or her before? See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But it starts with curiosity is the key. You know, I'm an ordained minister. After I came back, oh my God, I had to go to seminary. I had to study the Bible from beginning to end, because I grew up with this Bible, you see. And now how all of a sudden I'm discovering things that don't match. And God sent me to a 91-year-old man who, believe it or not, could not read or write. And he grew up in church, did not have the opportunity to go to be schooled. But he said to Almighty God, I'd like you to transfer what is in this book into my heart. He said, and for years he slept with the Bible open. He started at Genesis and he would strap it to his chest, put his hand on there, and that's how he would sleep. And he asked God to transfer what was in that Bible to him. Well, my God, God not only transferred it, but he was able to teach it at some levels that most pastors couldn't touch. He was 91 years of age.
And whatever your religion or path, and whatever the holy book is, or the books that are transmitting the knowledge and wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
that frequency that he absorbed through divine love is what we are really interacting with. It's not the words on the page, right? When we read the words on the page and we read the stories and the parables, there is a frequency being transmitted that bypasses our intellectual brain and goes right to soul and begins to uplift and release the hidden wisdom that was locked up in our subconscious. So the wisdom we get from these books is not just coming from the divine frequency coming through them, but the wisdom is also your own wisdom as soul being unlocked and connecting with it to where you have a divine dance of wisdom, love, and understanding. And this is really important. And a big thing I got from your book, um, Norma, is to understand and accept that we already are divine beings.
We are.
We already have received and are receiving all of the wisdom, all of the love, all of the power that is our birthright as a divine creature, a divine part of God. But we must dance the dance. We must receive the leading, and then we must lead, right? We must take what Spirit is giving us and take the responsibility to create from it, to serve from it, and to help pave our road that is leading into the inner worlds. Because we
Yeah.
all have our own lane in the highway that is leading us into those
That's
inner
right.
worlds. But we have to help build it.
As you speak, you're reminding me of oh my God. Every time I speak about this, I get chills. I had 5 children. My home was open to anybody. My children brought friends home who became family members. There was this one Japanese young man. He was here. He was studying here in America, and he and my son, became friends. And since his parents were in Japan, he spent a lot of time in my home. And I remembered when it was time for him to graduate from college, his father died suddenly. And he had to make the decision whether he would go home for the funeral and if he did, he would have to spend another year to graduate, you see. And I started communication with the mother, and she really wanted him to finish so he can get home, And so he did not go home for his father's funeral, but we supported him. He graduated, and when he graduated, his family sent me a ticket to Japan so they can say thank you. And one of the things that happened when I went to Japan was I was a Christian, and they've got their Japanese traditions. And oh my God, they got a lot they could teach us. They got a lot they could teach pastors in your members clean that church, even though many of them have got stores and what have you. And that cleaning that temple starts at about 4 o'clock in the morning. People come and they're not being paid to do that. That's part of their service. But what was interesting about that, I showed up, spent time among them. I was a Christian and they were following their Japanese religion. But when they asked me to speak, I was confounded. I said, but I'm not, they don't belong to your tradition. And I said, no, we would still like you to speak and we would have an interpreter. See what I'm saying? And I was so amazed at that because you wouldn't see that in a Christian church. They acknowledge the work that you've done on the inside. See what I'm saying? They acknowledge the fact that we're all really speaking to the same God. We might call it a different name, but it's the same spirit. Because when they asked me to speak, I said, but I'm a Christian. And they said, so? I have been trained to talk about God. I said, so are we. We just call him a different name. So as you begin to grow, as you begin to expand, see what I'm saying? You begin to understand that this energy that lives within you is spiritual, not religious, but spiritual. And as a matter of fact, they got ideas at one point to thought that I should join their community. So it is more of the frequency that you carry. How deep is that frequency merging with that which creates? Because whether you're a Japanese following whatever, or you're Christian following Christianity or what, if you are pure in your heart with that connection to energy, it doesn't really matter. And I have to say that we as Christians, we don't give to the world the best examples, I have to tell you. By the time I came back from Japan, I was like, wow. When you enter a Japanese temple, the only words you use is that to praise God. You don't walk into a Japanese temple and go, hi, Mary, how are you doing? No. You're there for reverence. And by the time I came back, I was like, wow.
You brought up the principle of service, and it's unique to each of us. I want to share a story since we're talking about prisoners. When I was serving in a role of leadership in the path that I'm involved in, I received a phone call. Somebody had asked to speak to somebody in my local area, and they gave him my phone number. And so I received a call from this gentleman, and he said, I was given your phone number. I really need to speak to somebody. My heart is very heavy with, I'm carrying a heavy load, and would like to speak to someone. So I said, sure. He said, there's a Burger King on this street. I go there for coffee. I said, oh, I know that Burger King. I'll be there. How about tomorrow at 1 o'clock? So I was there about 1:45 and was sitting at a table, and this man walks in, and he was a giant. He was huge. And I immediately could tell by the vibration, this was the man I was supposed to speak to. So I stood up, looked at him and smiled. He smiled and said, Mike. I said, yes. He said, and he walked over to the table. We shook hands, and I said, I'm pleased to meet you. Would you have a seat and we can talk? Well, he bent over to take a seat, and this giant knife came out of his coat and flopped on the table. And I'm looking at the knife and I'm looking at him. He's looking at the knife and looking at me, and he has tears in his eyes. And he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I've just been released from the prison right down the street, and I'm living in a homeless shelter right now because I have no place to go. He began to explain to me that he was hitchhiking through Maine on vacation, and somebody picked him up in a van. And it turned out that they had drugs in the van, and the van was stopped, and the police did a search and found the drugs, and they all went to prison, even though he was just a hitchhiker. So he said to me, what I want to talk to you about is the guilt that I'm carrying in my heart right now. And I said, well, what is that guilt? I said, you didn't do anything. You were an innocent bystander. He said, no. He said, I devoted, I declared myself a servant to the divine. I declared that every day I would help share the wisdom that I'm learning from my teaching and my path, and I'm stuck here in prison. I said, well, tell me a little bit about what it was like for you. He said, it's really frustrating. He said, they would send me the meanest, rottenest, angriest prisoner to be my cellmate. He said, and it would take me 6 months of teaching them how to chant. I would read to them from the books that I had. I would give them a book. I would talk to them about what they could learn from their dreams. I taught them the meditation. And finally, after 6 months, they were wonderful. And the warden would take them out and put another mean, nasty, rotten, angry prisoner in the cell with me, right? And I'm listening to this, and he's going on and on. And I said, John, do you realize the warden is not stupid, right? Do you realize they recognize you have the ability inside of you to share what is divine inside of you, and you are doing a better job rehabilitating your cellmates than the prison is doing, right? So, do you understand? You are fulfilling your desire to serve spirit and to teach. It's just not in a formal setting. It's just not out there at an intro lecture or a workshop or in a church. You've agreed and contracted with life and spirit to bring your wisdom, your love, your frequency, your energy, your devotion to the people in the prison. He said, oh my God, I never thought of that. He said, what's also interesting? He said, I'm living in this homeless shelter, and because of my spiritual training, at night, I see all the entities rising up from the other people in the homeless shelter that are mentally ill or drug addicted or alcohol addicted. And these entities come out, but I'm in my bed in a section and I'm singing my spiritual word, my chant. And this wall of light comes up from the floor to the ceiling where I am, and they cannot get in to the area that I'm in. He said, what I just realized was they move all the women and children into the section behind me so that at night,
women and children.
he's protecting all of the women and the children who are living in the homeless shelter from these entities by singing his hue, and reciting his, spiritual teaching and contemplating and bringing divine love into. I said, you're protecting these people with your state of consciousness. Do you understand? And it was an incredible conversation. And what he had told me was his hands, he had worked in the prison carpentry. They made furniture. And the work had developed carpal tunnel and arthritis from that work with the tools. And so he was afraid now that he's out, he can't get work because his hands don't work. And so I said, I think you should talk to this. I gave him information about talking to a social worker because you were working in prison. You were an employee of the prison, and therefore the state can give you medical care through, a Medicaid and workers' comp, right? And so a couple of months later, he came back and he said, what you said worked. I had a surgery and I had PT. He said, and my hands can work. He said, but the real miracle is I got a letter from into the prison, and the prison forwarded to me a letter from my sister, who I haven't seen in 5 years that I've been in prison. And she said, John, I bought a house. It's a real fixer-upper, and I need help. And I really miss you and I love you. Would you come and live with me and help me fix this house? And he wrote the address. She came back in a few days and said, I'm sending you a plane ticket to fly to Minnesota to come help me with my house. He said, not only are my hands fixed, but I have a home. I have my sister again, and I have worth. I have family. I said, do you realize you earned that? You earned that by the service that you gave. So I'm telling this story because how we serve the divine is unique to each of us. And
Yes.
sometimes we serve from the best experiences we've had, and sometimes from the worst. But it's all part of the divine plan for us to awaken and to bring value to life, to the world, right? If we just maintain ourselves to be a consumer, that's one state of consciousness. But if we become contributors, our awakening process is so much faster, so much greater. And the more we allow the divine to use us, the more it will develop us to be of greater use. And it will use us even more. So I wanted to
sharing that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's just perfect for your story and your experiences. And also, to the listeners out there, please take the time to recognize and explore the value you have inside of you, the unique value and the unique service that only you can give to the world, and not try to pattern yourself around somebody else, or not feel like to be of spiritual service, I have to be this or I have to be that.
Correct.
All you need is to have an open heart and a desire to serve, and spirit will use you.
Spirit will lead you.
Absolutely.
Spirit will lead you. Do we have any other questions?
Here's a comment from Facebook. Norma, I love the rhythm of divine spirit that has been flowing through this conversation with you. So this person is recognizing there is a rhythm.
There is a rhythm, there is a frequency, and whether we can see it or we can feel it is irrelevant. It's there. It's very much there.
Any other questions?
Silence is golden.
Well, there's a lot.
It's not the amount of words we offer up, but sometimes it's be still and know that I am God. Any other questions?
If not, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint for a second. And I want to talk to folks a little bit about It's not cooperate, but that's okay. Let's try it again. Let's go to here. Okay, one more reminder for folks. I'd love to encourage you to get a hold of Norma's book, Awakening. And if you just go to Amazon.com and look up Awakening or look up Reverend Dr. Norma Edwards, you will find it. There's a link I also put in the announcement, Facebook announcement. And also, Norma is going to be one of the keynote speakers at this conference coming up June 6th and 7th. And I'm looking forward to hearing you there, Norma. And also, last show we had Yvonne Kason, and we had Sean Lathan before that. So all of those folks are going to be speaking, and many, many more speakers. So if you go to spiritualconference.org and are interested in hearing different people from all different paths and all different religions and experiences, many who have had near-death experiences, many who have had spiritual transformational experiences like you and I have had. Spiritualconference.org, you can go there, you can register, and you can attend whatever sessions there. And I look forward to seeing you there, Norma, and hearing what you have to say. If there aren't any other questions, last chance. If not, Norma, I think I speak for everyone here who's listening, not only tonight, but all of those hundreds and hundreds of people who come through this show and watch it on Facebook and watch it on YouTube. We truly want to thank you for the service you give. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your wisdom and your love and inspiration. And you are now an official part of our family.
Thank you.
Yeah, and please know that you are appreciated and loved by all of us here tonight. And we're grateful, and we look forward to seeing you again.
And I'm looking forward for us to, we're both near-death experiencers, and I'm sure there's a lot that we can share about our experience.
Yeah.
But I want to end this by the very first statement I was given when I came back. Love is divine. God is love. I'm going to repeat that again. God is love. Let me ask you this question. Many of you have family, well, you have children, you have family members, etc., and you love them. And that love that you feel for them, even if they did something wrong, can you imagine yourself burning them up because of whatever it is that they did? I am here to tell you there is no hell. Do you want to know what's hell? When you keep going to the other side and they have to keep sending you back and sending you back because you refuse to learn. That's hell. And each time you come back, of course, if they're going to force you to recognize what you need to recognize, you may find yourself in a set of positions that are not very lovely. And that is deliberate. There is no life is eternal. I was sent back with a message. Life is eternal. So if you have to re-enter this lifetime 30 times before you get it, each time you come back, you are creating the circumstances of hell around you in the hope that you might be shaken into doing what it is that you should be doing. Love is divine. God is love. And when love touches this space we live in called earth, it turns into light. And light is the sword of creation. So if you can't get it in a positive stream, you are going to be forced to get it in a negative one and then get transformed to the positive. But whatever it takes, Mother Earth's job is intended to guide you to the acknowledgement that divine love dwells within us. And when we begin to be still and know that, life becomes a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for the attention you have given here tonight. I have really enjoyed our interaction. God bless you. God guide you. And remember, regardless of what you may or may not have done, God loves you. Because the love of God is eternal. God doesn't wake up one morning and say, well, I didn't like what you did. You know, I want to end with this one, Michael. When I was involved in the prison ministry, I was invited to this prison in a state where it was really, you know, people who, they didn't commit murder, etc., etc. There were people who probably, you know, got people out of money, etc. They stole money, etc., etc. And I always remember being invited to go and speak, you see, and it was during Lent. And during Lent, I carry a fast. My husband and I carry a fast for 2 days. And I remembered showing up, and they had heard that I did the washing of the feet in the prison that I was assigned to, and they asked would I would do it. And I said, yes, I would. And this young man, the warden brought paper towels, right? Because you wash your feet, you gotta wipe it. And he worked in the area where they did the washing and so on of it. And he says, oh no, let me see if the warden would allow me to go and get some towels. And I would agree that when this is over, I would personally give my time to wash those towels. You know what I'm saying? And he disappeared and he came back with loads of white towels. That young man got on his knees that night. And I'll never forget it. And afterwards, as I'm leaving, the warden said, you know, he was one of the most hardest criminals to work with. Because, you know, he obviously came from an influential family, and he certainly think that prison was a place where he should be. And he had all this whatever. And keeping in touch with the prison warders, I discovered that event, because he got on his knees with a towel in his hand. And as I washed the feet, you see, he dried the feet and transformation. So wherever we find people, know that there is a God. And that God dwells in all of us, whether we're doing good, bad, or indifferent. But guess what? Sometimes we've been so difficult to bring change when change comes with love, that the universe has got to put them in positions where change has got to come sometimes through hate. And remember that. And we live every single condition before we graduate from this school called life. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you find that you can't bring yourself to love them on an everyday basis, call their name in your prayers and step back and watch the change. If you give attention, you will see the change. All you got to do is call that name before Almighty God, because we are here to help each other. We are here to guide each other. We are here to speak on each other's behalf. And I want to thank you very much, Michael, for this opportunity tonight. And it's the very first time that I was asked to speak on a channel of someone who has had the same experience as I have. And it's been a pleasure. It's been absolutely a pleasure. God bless each and every one of you. Know that God lives within you. All it takes is for you to open your heart. And prayer is you begin with thanking God for his mercy. Then you shut up and you wait for his grace and his mercy to descend upon you and to guide you to what it is that the Spirit wants you to do in your everyday life. And do it as you mean it. Because then, some of us are going to be back to earth for over 100 times. Some of us will come 5 times and leave and ascend. There are many, many more dimensions. Christ said it in the Bible. There are many, many in my Father's house. There are many mansions. It begins with discipline. It begins with resilience. It begins with submitting yourself to the glory of God and allow him to remake you, to remold you, that you emerge as a human carrying the light of God, carrying the love of God, so that you can eventually graduate from this school called life. And believe you me, there are many, many mansions. Does it say in the Bible? There are many, many mansions. In my Father's house, there are many, many mansions. Peace, light, love, and much blessings. Namaste.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, both here live tonight. Thank you, everyone who'll be watching on Facebook and on YouTube. Please know that your light that you shine every day is important. Please know that the love you give is important. Please know that you are important. We are important to each other. And we all have something unique to give. And we all have something unique to receive.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Amen. Amen. God bless you. God
yeah.
guide you. My email, help me, Calvin. Reprogram your life at yahoo.com, and you will find reprogram your life at yahoo.com.
Yeah.
.org.
No, that's in WW.
Bless you. I enjoyed this evening, and may your light shine. As we give, so we receive. As we give, so I have seen so many blessings in the lives of people who a lot of people will condemn. You see what I'm saying? Because what they may have done. We wrote the program, the plan before we came. We got it approved by the Council of 9. And then we descend into this body so that we can have the experience. Why? Experience brings wisdom. And once we become wise enough, we rise into higher levels of consciousness where we can become overseers and guides and guards to those who are still learning. God bless you. God guide you. And be well. Be well.
Thank you, Norma.
You're welcome. And thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. Love you all. And look forward to seeing you again in our next episode. Take care.
And don't forget the conference is next Saturday.
That's right. That's right. Let me
CI
show.
conference next Saturday, and I will be one of the keynote speakers. And we're going to be talking about change.
Can we get a link to that, Michael?
Yep. Spiritualconference.org. Real simple. Spiritualconference.org. And that's June 6th and 7th. And it's free on Zoom. you register for it, they'll send you the links to actually attend. And also, if you go there, you'll see the schedule of speakers and topics. And
And I'll be
it's
speaking on Saturday.
great. Make sure that we tune in on Saturday. Okay.
God bless
Thanks.
you.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. We will see you next time. Take care.